Seeing his hometown burnt down made Shiori feel like he was watching the climax of an amazing movie. Mei, who usually thought movies were boring and predictable, now smiled in response to Shiori's words. She was grateful that the two of them were able to bring a beautiful ending. All the negative feelings that had grown and eaten away at their hearts in the city were now burned by the fire along with Akata town, which was slowly being reduced to ashes. The two then said goodbye to the people in the city who had not shown kindness to them. Before this incident occurred, it all began exactly 3 weeks earlier when Shiori and his father went to pick up a girl who would be moving in with them. The two of them rode in a car driven by Shiori's father, while the young man chose to sleep on the way to where they were to meet the girl. When they almost arrived at the station, Shiori, who had fallen asleep, was woken up by his father. Shiori seemed less than enthusiastic, a contrast to his father, who kept talking about a girl named Mei Sadu who would be moving in with them. When Shiori asked why Mei had to move in with them, his father didn't give a clear answer, but instead quickly changed the subject. Shiori knew his father was just trying to avoid answering. They then arrived at their destination. His father searched for Mei, while Shiori spotted her waiting. Mei stood out among the crowd at the station. Shiori's father then tried to make Mei comfortable and invited her to get into the car. She was also introduced to Shiori, and was also in the car. Shiori, who was still not satisfied with what his father answered when he asked, made the young man ask Mei directly about the reason why she move and live with Shiori and his father. Mei asked back if Shiori really didn't know the reason why the girl moved to their house. The girl then told her reason after confirming that Shiori really didn't know the reason behind Mei's move to her residence. The girl said that her older sister had been murdered. Shiori didn't really believe it, but Mei, who was impressed by confirming it with Shiori's father, made the young man's face pale. Shiori's father, according to Mei, was involved and didn't prevent what happened to Mei's older sister. Suddenly, the atmosphere between the three of them was very quiet, even though the car radio continued to play. After a few seconds of silence, Shiori's father spoke up, saying that it's really unfortunate what happened to Mei's sister. When he arrived home, Shiori's father went in front of the family prayer altar and prayed. His father's behavior after the barrage of questions and statements in the car was quite strange. He's being awfully diligent today. To think that his dad let someone die was something that made Shiori quite uneasy. Like any of that matters to his dead Bog sister, he doesn't have it in him to do that. And what made Shiori even more doubtful was the reaction his father showed earlier in the car. Shiori didn't want to think about it any further. Now he was helping Mei adapt to his house. He went to the room where Mei was, knocked on the door, and returned to meet Mei, who had changed her clothes. Shiori came to give some things that Mei might need. He also conveyed his father's message to the girl that if there was one thing that Mei needed but wasn't in the house, then the girl was free to buy it. Shiori also didn't forget to give Mei a message, which the young man hoped would show that they could get along. Unlike Shiori, who looked so nervous, Mei herself seemed to have adapted quite well. The girl even responded to Shiori's hopes by saying that since the two of them were going to start living under one roof, then they shouldn't continue to act awkwardly and keep their distance. Mei invited Shiori to call her familiarly. Shiori was still dissatisfied with the answers to the questions and statements that came up while they were in the car. The young man wanted to ask more details, but Mei spoke before Shiori could finish his question. Mei instead asked Shiori if the young man believed in God. Shiori was confused. Mei then invited Shiori to take her to a place that Mei wanted to go to using Shiori's bike. Mei also said that she would give answers to some of the questions that Shiori asked her. Shiori was surprised and silent for a moment. Mei gave a brief information that Shiori's dad didn't exactly lay a hand on Mei's sister or anything. Shiori remained silent while Mei had started to walk out. Shiori could only obey Mei's words and ride his bike while carrying the girl to her desired destination. Shiori, as a resident of Akata City, actually hates the city. The reason is simple. It's a cesspool of awful things. There are so many problems in the city that are never resolved, starting from scandals involving politicians getting covered up, bullying being ignored, the media always siding with the powerful, and the weak are never saved. During the trip, Shiori, who kept thinking about how bad the city he lived in was, suddenly got a question from Mei, who wanted to confirm about the young man who didn't go to school. Shiori wasn't really bothered by the question because a student who chose not to go to school was not a rare thing. But what shocked the young man was that May could find out the reason behind the young man's choice not to go to school. May could tell the fact that Shiori had been a victim of bullying at his school. Shiori was quite confused about how the girl could know what had happened to the young man. May then said that she had the ability of clairvoyance that allowed her to see anything. Shiori was silent because, honestly, the young man didn't believe it. Even though May herself had said that she wasn't lying, Shiori assumed that what the girl knew might have come from what her father told her. After all, for Shiori, this factor wasn't something that could be covered up forever, and it only took time for May to know the truth. Shiori preferred to continue thinking about how terrible the city he lived in was. The city had absolutely no privacy, so news and gossip could spread in an instant. Every wall in the city had ears, and all the residents' eyes watched each other, so they wouldn't miss turning someone else's misery into their own amusement. Once again, Shiori's thoughts were suddenly interrupted by May's words. The girl suddenly spoke and said that the city had changed quite a bit from before. These words then elicited a reciprocal reaction from Shiori, who was curious about whether the girl had lived there before. May answered with certainty that the girl had indeed lived in the city for a period of time. Her experiences there had made her hate the city and its people. The words May used to express her hatred made Shiori wonder about what May had actually experienced in the city in the past. May suddenly asked Shiori if he knew about that town legend of sacrifices. They arrived at the location May was heading to. Shiori answered May, unsure if the answer he gave was the legend she was referring to. Sure enough, they both meant the same thing. The legend they were discussing was Okakashitsutsumi. Shiori had read about the ritual in a local history book, so he had some knowledge of it, though not in detail. May explained that Okakashitsutsumi is a festival for worshipping a snake deity called Okakashisama. It was a ritual that used to be held every year on the day of the summer solstice until 1939. A naked shrine maiden, covered in purifying incense, would repeatedly circle in that place. They finally arrived at May's destination. Shiori was honestly worried because the girl continued into the forest without the slightest hesitation. They arrived at the sacred rock of Akata Mountain. The ritual is performed by the shrine maiden who chants Ge Kaka Okaka Namiya throughout the whole night, completely naked. They say it served as a metaphor for the sexual union between the shrine maiden and Okakashisama. Once that is done, the shrine maiden and Okakashisama literally become one, and then the next day, the second phase of the ritual begins. The next phase is disposing of the 7 paper dolls that the headband prepared in advance over the span of about 10 days. First is break the doll's neck, second is break the doll's neck and pour alcohol over it. Third is break the doll's neck and pour urine over it. Fourth is break the doll's torso and legs. Fifth is break the doll's torso and neck. Sixth is break the doll's torso and neck and cut off its limb, and then last is seventh, break the doll's torso, legs, and neck. Once everything is over, Okakashisama leaves from within the shrine maiden's body, and then crosses the Shishiro Bay, located behind Akata Mountain. It's believed that he rests briefly Kugashima, located across from there. That is everything about the Okakashitsutsumi, but there is a part of that legend that differs from the truth. What the people of Akata Town offered in ancient times was not 7 paper dolls, it was 7 human beings. Shiori tried to deny it, as far as he had read in local history books. What May had just said was just an unproven theory. May was so certain that the people of Akata Town had indeed offered sacrifices. May's words began to make Shiori shudder, and he concluded that May had gone mad. Worse still, the girl confirmed that she was indeed insane. Shiori was skeptical. He wanted to know if what May said was true, then there should be evidence. Unfortunately, May couldn't say there was any evidence. In fact, it's more likely that it's all made up. Shiori felt goosebumps. May knew that the young man was starting to get scared and was trying to return, but they couldn't. May continued, explaining that she didn't need proof of these things because she had witnessed the entire tradition with her own eyes. Where Shiro stood, as the young man looked up, a giant snake opened its mouth wide at Shiori. Shiori was almost resigned, but the giant snake seemed very familiar to May. May said that the giant snake was Okakashisama. According to May, Okakashisama quite liked Shiori's presence. Shiori was naturally afraid. Why did May show that to him? And what did she want from him? Shiori really wanted to know her motivation. The girl's main goal is still the same, for the sake of avenging her sister. Shiori wants to know her true intentions. The incident occurred 3 years ago when Akata Town drove her older sister to take her own life. In total, There are about 7 people who want to be eliminated by May to avenge her sister's death. These people include the oldest son of the Tamoy family, Tamoy Shoma. Next is Shuma's younger twin brother, Tamoy Yudo. Next is the youngest brother, Tomoy Suki. The next target is the father of the 3 brothers, Tomoy Masanori, then Shuma's girlfriend at the time, Yokota Manami Minami's Jr., Nanga Ryoko, and then the 3 brothers' friend, Nishimoto Shiua. May has met the perpetrators who had pushed her sister to decide to eliminate herself. Even at their victim's funeral, there was not a single tear of sadness or condolences, but jokes and laughter sung by the bullies. The sight certainly made May very angry, but before the girl vented her emotions, May heard a whisper that did not come from a man or a woman, but guided her to climb Akata Mountain. May obeyed the voice she heard and arrived at the place where Okakashi-sama was. Before the embodiment of the serpent god, May trembled in fear, but she also received a promise of power from the great snake. But in exchange, Okakashi-sama wanted 7 human sacrifices. Hearing the offer, where the number of human sacrifices corresponded to the number of people who had bullied her sister, gave May new determination and hope. May decided to sacrifice the 7 people who had bullied her sister to Okakashi-sama. Afterward, May intended to destroy Akata City, the city that had caused her sister's misery. To do so, May asked for help from Shirori. Shirori had never considered anything as extreme as revenge or even considered anything like it. However, Shirori chose to help May. They then returned home. On the way, Shirori asked why May had chosen to ask him to join her plan. There was no specific reason. All May said was that he was a better person than herself. This reason then made Shirori unconsciously grin. From that moment on, they would witness the disappearance of 7 savage humans in Akata City. It would only be later that Shirori recalled what May was hiding at that time. Once all the sacrifices had been made, May was destined to lose her life. After they arrived home, their activities went on as usual, as if nothing had happened at all. They arrived home at dusk. They had dinner together as usual and even exchanged conversation as usual. After that, they then returned to their respective rooms and rested until finally waking up the next day. As usual, Shirori greeted the morning half asleep because at night, he had quite severe insomnia. That day, he thought about skipping school again. Even the events of the previous day about revenge and Okakashi-sama didn't seem so real when he thought back to it. Shirori decided to assume what happened yesterday was just a dream, but when the young man entered the kitchen area and saw May enjoying her food while watching a movie, everything seemed to go on like a normal morning routine. May and Shirori exchanged morning greetings, and then the girl offered her breakfast menu in detail to Shirori, who had just woken up from his bed. The young man was quite surprised when he heard how May described her breakfast menu, where instead of the salad that was their breakfast, May preferred to mention one by one the ingredients in the salad. After that, both Shirori and May returned to focus on something that each of them was doing. May, who was enjoying her food, hissed in annoyance because the movie she was watching was not that impressive and made May feel bored to the point of sleepiness. The girl thought that the movie might be more suitable for Shirori, who suffered from acute insomnia. Hearing May mention that he had insomnia made Shirori very surprised by how the girl could know that he had insomnia. One word that could explain how May could know that was clairvoyance. May even bothered to explain the details that Shirori had not been able to get pills to relieve his insomnia from the clinic, so Shirori had always bought them over the counter. May also mentioned that the thing that made Shirori suffer from insomnia was due to acute stress caused by Shirori, who received bullying from Tamoy Suki. Shirori could not move. Although the young man wanted to forget what happened yesterday, because the incident was a reality, whether he wanted to or not, his choice to get involved could no longer be undone. Shirori could only surrender. He then asked if May's clairvoyance came from Okakashi-sama. It was true. The range of clairvoyance covered most of Akata town. For May, it was like watching a movie. If it's about the townspeople, she could even understand a little, even if they were outside town. From a front row seat, in full detail. Not only clairvoyance, May could also use psychokinesis, allowing her to move objects of a relatively small size. With the abilities that May has shown, Shirori assumes that the girl might carry out her plan by utilizing that power, but his suspicion is denied by May. For May, those abilities are still not enough to be able to avenge her on the 7 people who caused her older sister to commit suicide. May does not want to risk being covered in pig blood either. Shirori then asks, if not with those abilities, then with what May will carry out her plan. The girl confidently answers that to succeed in her plan, May is willing to perform the Okakashisatsumi ritual. With that, May is sure that her revenge will be easy to do. May's first target is Tamoi Suki. Tamoi Suki is an idiot who flaunts the Tamoi family's influence like it's his own. Suki looked up to Shoma and Yudo, who acted like they could do anything. And even though he was just a middle schooler at the time, he bullied May's big sister, who was a high schooler. Suki is a truly rotten bastard to the core. May chooses Suki as her first offering, and according to the ritual, she will break Suki's neck. Shiroi was shocked. He then wanted to know what his role in May's plan was because the young man had no superpowers or physical strength to offer. May had arranged it. Shiroi was only asked to help May in executing her plan. May explained that she was using the Okakashi-sama power for revenge, so the method of disappearance should not be seen by humans. If another human saw it, it would cause great chaos. Therefore, May asked Shiroi to stand guard and keep an eye out so that no one else came to see. Because he was only asked for that, Shiroi agreed confidently. Before that, the summer solstice would only occur 10 days later. Before that, May needed to fully obtain Okakashi-sama's power. Anything to avenge her sister's death. Not only on the 7 suspects, but on all the residents of Akata town. With her clairvoyance, May had witnessed everything. May honestly didn't want to admit that the cruel act was committed by humans. The bullying was so malicious and horrific. It wasn't something half-hearted or mild like that. What they did to May's sister was acts that destroyed a person's dignity. An endlessly repeating, never-ending revolting torment, and all of it burned into those eyes of hers. For May, her older sister was the kindest person to her. Such a kind girl shouldn't have been treated so cruelly. The actions of the 7 perpetrators were unforgivable, yet they still had a future when May's older sister had to end her life. Not only that, but even Akata town could continue its life as if nothing had happened. Such a thing deeply hurt May. May had no intention of letting anyone escape her. May vented all her emotions in front of Shiroi. Shiroi, in that situation, still maintained his composure. He could still be a support for May, and that was because he had never once felt frustration or depression that made him have the intention of revenge. Shiroi was actually also fed up with his bullies and the adults in Akata town, but the young man could only surrender and compromise. According to him, it was the easiest way to continue life, to survive in a rotten city. He realized that his resolution was different from May's. May was very ambitious to succeed in her revenge. That night, Shiroi couldn't sleep again. After all, it was natural for his insomnia to take over. He left his room and heard a conversation in a foreign language coming from May's room. He paused for a moment in front of May's room until she opened the door to meet her uninvited guest. Shiroi looked awkward and said he was going back to his room. His plan failed when May offered to watch the movie with her. While watching together, silence fell between them. Only the sound of the film echoed until Shiroi finally asked why May liked films. May was silent for a moment before finally answering with a question. The girl asked Shiroi if the young man had ever once thought, "If only I could live someone else's life." It's not about wanting to be famous or accomplish something big. It doesn't mean wanting to change himself or doubting the path he has taken and lived. Not because of those things, but May still has doubts about why and who she is. Is there another possibility or something like that? Thinking about such things does not produce anything, but May wants to know if Shiroi has ever even once thought like that. Shiroi wasn't sure, but May always thought so. When she watched a movie, May could become someone else, experience or feel someone else's life, live in a place she had never known, see something she had never seen, or even feel like falling in love with someone she'd never met before. And through that, May was just a little bit fulfilled. After saying that, May fell asleep soundly, not waking up even when the movie was over. Shiroi thought that the world always said that revenge yielded nothing. That was justice, and May, now drowning in despair, would never accept those words. All of this made Shiroi begin to question what justice truly was. Without realizing it, the young man also fell into a deep sleep. Shiroi woke up with a start. Morning had arrived, marked by the sun shining brightly. Shiroi woke up next to May, who was still sleeping. Shiroi saw the girl's sleeping face, which looked defenseless. May was only 1 year younger than Shiroi, but circumstances had dragged her out of her ordinary life. Shiroi sympathized. He wanted to be able to do something for May, but the young man was not sure what he could do. Mei woke up and exchanged greetings with Shiori. They then rushed to start the morning with a similar breakfast as the previous day. Shiori became more convinced in his heart about whatever the world said about justice. Whatever the situation, the young man wanted to be an ally of justice, according to Mei. One day before the summer solstice, Shiori and Mei prepare to go somewhere. Starting with an unusual conversation, Mei tries to get Shiori to relax a bit. That day, the beginning of their revenge plan begins. Upon arriving at the ritual site, Mei repeated her instructions to Shiori. Shiori's role was to be a lookout until dawn, while Mei underwent the ritual to merge with Okakashi-sama. If anyone came, Shiori must chase them away. Because it was done with Mei having to undress, Shiori was not allowed to peek, no matter what. There was a moment of silence before they began, and Mei again asked if Shiori was ready. They had made their intentions, and the time had come. The ritual began. Shiori now had to stay with Mei until the end. The ritual began as the shrine maiden began to recite what she was to hear for Okakashi-sama. Her light footsteps echoed quite quietly. Shiori felt a strange feeling, almost as if the boundary between the forest and him was dissolving. Even his sense of time was slipping away. Some time passed, and Mei's voice brought Shiori back to his senses. The ritual was complete. Shiori asked if his companion had succeeded. Instead of words, Mei preferred to demonstrate. With just one hand, the girl could even uproot a tree from the ground. Her power was extraordinary. A terrifying divine power that no human could ever hope to oppose. Mei wielded that divine power. Her appearance was so beautiful, it surpassed all else. The first phase of the ritual had been completed, and Mei now possessed incredible power. The two then returned home on Shiori's bike. Although they now possessed quite extraordinary powers, there was still one thing that needed to be done for their plan to succeed. Shiori prepares to go to school. Mei is quite worried and asks again if the young man is really sure about coming to school. Shiori has made up his mind. With clairvoyance, Mei may be able to see everything, but the drawback is that they will not be able to hear what is happening or predict what actions will be taken. Therefore, Shiori decides to go to school. To monitor Tomoe Suki's movements, according to Shiori, the easiest way is by going to school because Shiori is in the same class as Suki. If you think about it, it's quite difficult, especially for Shiori, who was a victim of Suki's bullying. However, Shiori has made up his mind to stay by Mei's side. Before the young man actually leaves the house, Mei advises Shiori to remain extra cautious around Suki. Suki has tons of cronies regardless of the grade. Mei warns Shiori to be extra careful. As he neared school, a feeling of suffocation began to overcome Shiori. His legs trembled, unable to pedal any further. Although it had only been a while since Shiori had decided to skip school, somehow, the school environment had already exerted immense pressure on him psychologically. Shiori was depressed, but he regained his resolve. He couldn't leave everything to Mei. At least he had to do what he could. The young man determinedly entered the school grounds. When he arrived at the parking lot and parked his bike, Shiori immediately received a morning greeting from Suki in the form of a direct kick that hit Shiori in the stomach. Tomoe Suki, the first target of Mei's plan, the figure who was also responsible for bullying Mei's older sister. The figure had appeared directly in front of Shiori as a predator. The bullying took place in an open space, a place where many students passed by, but no one wanted to get involved. Everyone who passed chose to look away. No one wanted to deal with the Tomoe family. All advice always began with the suggestion not to get involved with the Tomoe family. The strange atmosphere in the city also further strengthened the foundation of the Tomoe family. The morning was chaotic, the afternoon was even more chaotic. Shiori attended gym class, but when he was about to change into his uniform, Shiori had lost his school clothes that he had initially put in his locker. Of course, the perpetrator was clearly Suki, but Shiori chose not to respond emotionally. Shiori chose to look for his clothes. He then found his bag thrown in the middle of the rice field. Shiori approached and thought about how to get his bag, which was in the middle of the rice field. While Shiori was still lost in thought, a kick from behind flew to his back, making Shiori fall into the rice field immediately. His front body was covered in mud from the rice fields. Suki laughed out loud while Shiori hurriedly got up to get his bag, so he could get out of there. Unfortunately, when Shiori got his bag, it wasn't a change of clothes but trash. Shiori's change of clothes was still in Suki's hands. Suki told Shiori that if Shiori really wanted a change of clothes, Then Shiori would have to play with his genitals in front of them using the mud from the rice fields. Shiori was stunned and couldn't believe it. Suki started to lose his patience and shouted. Their commotion attracted the attention of a passing adult. The passerby was named Matsubara. Matsubara asked what Suki and the others were doing that made so much noise. Suki responded that they were just playing. He didn't even hesitate to confirm it with Shiori. Shiori just kept quiet with a sharp stare. How could the situation look like they were playing? But miraculously, Matsubara was sure that they were playing. Honestly, Shiori had been aware from the start that he would never receive help from outsiders or adults. The young man never even thought about it. In the past and from now on, too, learning to compromise with things like that is just how they get by in life. That is the meaning of growing up, according to Shiori. It really broke Shiori's heart, even though no one had seen or helped. Even this time, Matsubara also just left them. Suki returned his focus to Shiori. Shiori warned Suki that the young man would not be able to get away easily. Just as Suki was about to explode, a teacher came to remind him that class was about to start. Suki could only obey, annoyed that his fun was cancelled. Suki left in frustration. Shiori was left to vent his frustration by shouting. For him, everything was so chaotic at that moment. The unreasonable bullying from Tamoi Suki trampled on people's dignity. The adults of Akata Town who couldn't stand up to power, and most of all, he, who had never resisted until now. While he was still wallowing in the rice field, a girl appeared asking about his condition. The girl advised Shiori to get out of the rice field immediately so he wouldn't catch a cold. Shiori was shocked. The girl's identity was very clear. She was one of Mei's revenge targets. The girl was the student council president named Nanga Ryoko. Nanga's presence there confused Shiori, but on the other hand, Nanga also asked why Shiori was there. Of course, Shiori answered so curtly that the reason he was there was because of the violent actions carried out by Suki and his friends. Nanga reacted so flatly, while saying that what her boyfriend did was very cruel. But the girl then also explained the reason why Shiori could be the target of Suki's bullying. The reason why the young man continues to be targeted by Suki is that Shiori got the top score on the test by a landslide. Shiori's achievement has created deep envy and hatred in the hearts of Suki and his friends. Shiori can't understand that just for that trivial reason, he has to go through various kinds of misery caused by the actions of Suki and his friends. Nanga only argues that reasons are always petty. Nanga can't understand why Shiori, who has lived in Akata Town for so long, doesn't understand the situation at all. To survive, they have to deliberately score bad grades and keep a low profile. Nanga is very grateful for people like Shiori, whom she considers to be someone who can't read the room. Thanks to people like Shiori, Nanga can live safely and peacefully. After hearing Ryoko's words, Shiori was now even more convinced. Those who bought it were definitely evil, but those who pretended not to see it were just vile. Shiori also remembered Mei's words about Nanga always being there during the bullying. She was taken in by Suki and was always there watching, reading the room, and even laughing along. At any point, she could have reached out to her, she could have saved her, but Nanga remained silent. Someone like that becoming the student council president was the worst thing. Shiori was fed up. He began to speak out against Nanga, who boasted about her ability to read the room. By reading the room, Nanga had killed Akari Satu. Nanga refused to accept the blame. She believed Akari Sata died because of herself. Shiori was now convinced that Nanga truly must face judgment. Nanga Ryoko is a student who is the student council president at Akata High School. She is also an honor student who is envied by many other students and is the girlfriend of Tamoi Suki. Therefore, she reigns over Akata High from both the surface and the shadows. Nanga refused to admit that she was also involved and was one of the causes of Akari Sata's death. Shiori's accusation was considered quite cruel to Ryoko. The girl insisted that she never did anything for Akari's death, and if she did, she would be in the position of a victim who had been dragged into being with Suki. In front of Shiori, Nanga said that she never once wanted to be Suki's girlfriend. The reason why the girl ended up being Suki's girlfriend was that Suki was the first to confess his feelings to Ryoko. The girl only accepted the confession because she didn't know what would happen if she refused. Nanga also felt that it was quite scary that the incident was unavoidable. However, Shiori still couldn't accept the girl's way of thinking. The young man then asked what if the position was reversed, where Nanga was the one who received the bullying. would the girl still be able to say the same thing as she just said? In fact, Nanga didn't care enough about it because, according to her, they abandoned the victim so that doesn't happen to them in the first place. They should be the ones to protect themselves. The one being bullied is in the wrong. This statement reflects Nanga's way of thinking, where it's fine to step on others and laugh, all for self-preservation. Shiori was no longer afraid. With the response from his very selfish student council president, Shiori then asked again that even if they retaliate, Nanga doesn't have the right to complain. With a confident and sharp expression, Shiori managed to make Nanga tremble. The girl wanted to know what retaliation meant, for whom it was done because Akari Satu was no longer in the world. If Shiori was only talking about ghosts or curses, then the conversation was very rude. One thing Shiori ordered for Nanga was that the girl would pay a fitting price for Akari Sata's death. Time has passed. Now it's lunchtime. For Shiori, time passes so slowly. Shiori has met their two targets. Previously, he knew very well that Suki was indeed a very bad person. But after the young man met Ryoko, the girl became the first nomination for the worst person for Shiori. At that time, Shiori was washing himself in the sink. The young man honestly didn't want to stay at school any longer, but if he followed his desire to go home, his progress would not progress at all. He wouldn't be able to know Suki's movements. Suddenly, from outside, the voices of Suki and Nanga were heard talking. Nanga seemed to be inviting Suki to have lunch together on the rooftop. Suki, who was happy, then called his close friend. And at that moment, Nanga realized Shiori's presence there. When on the rooftop, Shiori, who was bullied that morning, became a hot topic for them. Nanga, who still felt uncomfortable with Shiori's words, suddenly asked if Shiori and Akari Satu had an attachment relationship. Suki didn't know and didn't care. The young man instead continued his conversation and his plan to prank Shiori further in the future. Nanga still tried to talk to her lover by saying that Shiori had said something strange before, but instead of getting sympathy, the girl almost provoked Suki's emotions. Nanga immediately changed her attitude to be sweet so that her lover would not be angry. Seeing his girl adorable again, Suki then asked Nanga to go to his villa after school. Nanga initially seemed reluctant because it seemed like they had done that quite often. Suki didn't care. Even if Nanga rejected it as a threat, the young man started groping Nanga's body right away, even though they were in front of Suki's friends. Nanga could only surrender immediately so that the harassment could stop. Suki stopped exploring his hands when he got Nanga's promise that he was willing to do whatever Suki wanted at the villa later. His friends were quite jealous of the privileges that Suki had, while at the same time, Shiori gave the information he had heard to Mei. Shiori and Mei immediately headed to the villa Suki had mentioned. Without waiting for school to end, Shiori even left the rest of his class to rush to the scene. When he met Mei, she already had a solution and access to enter the villa. They entered to install a wiretap inside the villa. Shiori was quite amazed at how Mei could prepare everything so thoroughly. In fact, Mei had indeed been preparing to carry out her revenge alone, therefore, she had prepared everything. Mei and Shiori chose several spots where they could clearly observe what Suki and Nanga were doing. Everything went according to Mei's plan. The spot would be at the Y intersection they passed to get there. Suki and Nanga always split up there when they went home. Mei had even confirmed it with clairvoyance. The plan was Shiori would monitor Suki and Ryoko's movements. When he was finished and about to go home, Mei would stand by at her position, hiding in the forest area near the path Suki passed after parting with Ryoko. Mei would then execute Suki when the young man was alone. Shiori was a little doubtful about the plan, which seemed too wasteful of time, but Mei chose to wait for a moment because even though she already had considerable power from Okakashi-sama, that power also had accuracy that depended on distance. In addition, they also have to follow the stages according to the tradition that states the sacrifices must be disposed of in order. There must be a reason behind why the ritual must be carried out according to the rules, even though Mei herself does not know the reason behind it. Mei has also prepared various ritual tools that she can use to kill her target according to plan. Shiori is very impressed with the preparations that have been done by Mei's maid until now. For Mei herself, the success of her plan is a must because she has waited for 3 years to be able to take revenge. Therefore, Mei herself must ensure that she can really complete her plans without fail. Mei then also gave Shiori a folding knife to use as a weapon if needed. Shiori initially wanted to refuse because he was also worried about Mei, But his worries were in vain because soon after, Mei showed the great power she had received from Okakashi-sama. The plan was ready. One message Shirori to me was not to observe while Suki and Nanga were in the villa. Shirori did not give a factual reason, but the young man gave a logical reason that they only needed to focus on revenge. Mei finally agreed. There were only a few moments left before the school bell rang to signal the end of school. While waiting, the two were silent. Shirori felt Mei looked a little gloomy, and the young man understood very well why. In the next few hours, they would become murderers. Shiori's conscience wavered. He knew revenge was wrong, but he also did it for Akari Satu. Shirori, who was a little frustrated, then asked Mei to break the silence. The question asked was whether Mei and Akari, his older sister who had passed away during her lifetime, had a close sibling relationship. Mei was silent for a moment, making Shirori overthink the question that he felt he shouldn't have asked. Shortly after, Mei answered that she and Akari were like that. Hearing this, Shirori became even more curious about what kind of older sister Akari was in Mei's eyes. Mei then explained that her older sister, Akari, was a very kind person and a source of pride and happiness for Mei. However, no matter how good Akari was, sadly, she was now gone. Mei was devastated by her sister's departure, especially since she had always been by Akari's side, but still couldn't realize the wounds Akari had received until her older sister finally decided to disappear. The time to put their plan into action had arrived. Suki and Nanga arrived at the location. Shirori and Mei hurried to their respective posts. Shirori was a little worried about Mei, but she tried to reassure him that she had Okakashi-sama and Shirori with her. The plan began. Suki and Nanga were making out alone inside the villa, while Shirori was outside and observing. Nanga again brought up the topic of Shirori and his relationship with Akari. Unlike before, this time Suki listened enough, although in the end, he still didn't care. The young man was more interested in doing other things with Nanga. Nanga still tried to ask questions by making her face show an adorable expression. Unfortunately, at that time Suki didn't want to discuss it and turned to offering drug pills to Nanga. Nanga couldn't refuse and could only surrender. This made Nanga lose consciousness. Until now, she had always followed Suki's every wish, even if it meant causing her own misery. She didn't want to be the target of bullying in Akata town. She always remembered the advice where she was advised to be able to read the room and act conducive. It was a smart way to survive, but her calm was now shattered. Triggered by Suki releasing his seed inside Ryoko, Suki's joyful screams further drove Nanga, who was initially pensive and depressed, to a complete frenzy. The girl ran out of the villa screaming. Shirori witnessed this from his position. From his observations, Nanga initially acted innocently, but now lost control. This was the result of Nanga's dating Suki. Shirori believed that Nanga's current situation was due to her lack of self-respect and preference for self-preservation. Shirori reported the situation to Mei. His message was well received. Despite the changing circumstances, Mei continued with her plan. However, Nanga suddenly ran into the area near where Mei was hiding. Mei initially didn't respond, even though Nanga had appeared. She preferred to follow her plan, so that the time to deal with Nanga hadn't yet arrived. However, Nanga suddenly shouted, complaining that Akari, who had committed suicide, shouldn't have blamed herself for the girl's death. These words made Mei a little shaky and careless. Nanga realized someone was there because Mei accidentally reacted and made a sound. Nanga ran around looking for the figure. Mei was desperate. She was in a situation where she couldn't escape. The situation was out of control, and she couldn't follow the plan. She then sent a message to Shirori first about her steps, and then went outside to face the enraged Nanga. Mei intended to kill Nanga first. Shirori had received the message. He was worried because there was no further news from Mei. Unlike Ryoko, Suki was now silent. Shirori was sure the young man would not leave for some time to come. Suki still muttered his desire to release his desires once again. Unfortunately, Nanga had already run away. In the midst of his remaining consciousness, Suki thought about why Nanga left. He guessed maybe because he came inside this time, but he denied it because he had done that too before. If not because of that, Suki's next suspicion was because of drugs, but he denied it because to Suki, earlier Nanga also seemed to really enjoy the effects of drugs. Suki was upset because he felt he had done a lot for Nanga and was even willing to listen to her story that day. Suki thought back to everything Nanga had said. The girl had said she was scared, and he remembered her responding that her father had connections that would always save her. But then he realized something important. Suki realized something important. Nanga didn't want protection from Suki's father, but wanted it from Suki himself. Suki then suddenly got up and ran like Nanga had before. Shiori felt the situation would be dire if Suki and Mei met. But the young man also wanted to be sure that the girl was overpowered enough to handle it. Nothing serious would happen. Shiori tried to convince himself that Mei didn't need his help, but his thoughts were defeated. Shiori ended up running after her to protect Mei.